A long time ago I reviewed the video game Star Wars Rogue Leader and kind of at the same time its predecessor Star Wars Rogue Squadron. If you haven't seen the review, don't, it's terrible. But let me give you a brief synopsis of my thoughts of both games. Rogue Squadron was a fantastic game, but it was held down by escort levels where the escort in question was made of paper. Rogue Leader was also a really good game, but it was held down by enemies being so accurate that every ship that's not an X-Wing or Y-Wing was as useless as Windows Vista. Both games also lean hard on fake difficulty. The first game has an overabundance of missile turrets that kill you in seconds, while the second game has 2 levels that force you to go one-on-one with a goddamn Star Destroyer! 2 at once in one of the levels. I've since played Battle for Naboo, which is kind of a spin-off of the series, and even though you either can't or shouldn't select more than one ship for levels in that game, its levels are so much better designed than the other Rogue Squadron games that I'm tempted to call it the best in the series. But now I finally played the final game of the series, Star Wars Rebel Strike, and from what I've heard this is the black sheep of the Rogue Squadron family, so let's see how this one fares out. As is standard for the Rogue Squadron series, the controls are excellent. You can smoothly turn in any direction that you want, and your ship auto-levels with the horizon to keep you from getting disoriented. The levels have an excellent variety to them. There are a few escort levels, but they aren't frustrating like they are in other Rogue Squadron games because you're actually given room for error before your escort bursts into flames. There are levels where you're fighting Imperial gunships, which is a new addition to the series. There are 2 levels where you're flying down the trenches of a Super Star Destroyer, which is frantic, new, and really fun. And there are a few levels that are just good old-fashioned dogfights where you fly in and massacre TIE fighters, which are some of the more fun levels. There aren't a ton of flying levels, actually, which I'll talk about that in a minute, but the flying levels are really well designed, all unique, and all fun. In fact, they might just be the best they've ever been in the series, especially since the advancement of technology means that there are more fighters around at once than in the other Rogue Squadron games. Also, give credit where credit is due, they did a lot to remove the problems from Rogue Leader. Enemies tend to attack you from the front so they don't tail you incessantly, cutting you to shreds, and the game's ships have been dramatically rebalanced. The enemies aren't quite as accurate, so ships that don't have astromech droids are actually useful. The A-Wing has super fast missiles that turn it from being totally useless to being the best dogfighter in the game, in the few missions where you get to use it. Even the Slave One is somewhat useful now. It's got the sonic mines from Attack of the Clones that kick 11 kinds of ass. It still gets shot down easily, but it takes a ton of enemies down with it. Plus, one of the biggest problems with Rogue Leader is that picking up homing upgrades for your warheads is probably the single dumbest thing you can do in that game, since the game would lock onto everything except the mission-critical objective that you need the weapons for. Rebel Strike lets you fire missiles straight even after you've picked up the homing upgrade. It's a simple change, but it makes a huge difference. The problem with the varied ships is that the game just doesn't have a lot of levels where you get to use them. There are only 4 levels where you're allowed to use any ship that you want. 2 of those levels force you to switch to a different ship half or a third of the way through, so it doesn't make a whole lot of difference which ship you choose, and the other 2 levels have you flying through a Super Star Destroyer, weaving through trenches and avoiding guns that cut you to shreds, which makes some of the ships extremely poor choices. There's only one stage where the Slave One has any use to it since the damn thing is too weak to survive the Super Star Destroyer trenches, and one level has you flying through an energy tunnel. I kid you not, the Slave One is too big to fit through and it's physically impossible to play the level. The levels are well enough designed that they're fun even with the lack of choice in ships, but still, the game gives you unlockables that you can't use. Why? Because you're meant to use the unlockables in multiplayer. This was the first Rogue Squadron game to incorporate a multiplayer mode, and I'll open that can of worms later, but the bulk of the game's unlockables are pretty much exclusively for the multiplayer mode, while the single-player content gets ripped off. Alright, it's time to address the elephant in the room. You're probably wondering why Rebel Strike is the black sheep of the Rogue Squadron series, and there's a very simple answer. It's because in over half of the game's levels, you're not flying a starfighter. Some levels have you drive a walker, there are 2 levels where you drive a speeder bike, and the remaining levels, you're running around on foot. And the on-foot levels suck. So why would you make a game and a series of flight sims and have over half of the levels be on foot? And follow-up question, did you learn nothing after Star Fox Assault tried doing it? And these levels are a heavily advertised aspect of the game. This was a selling point. Climb out of the cockpit and battle the Empire on foot. Climb out of the cockpit? You buy Rogue Squadron games because they're flight sims, specifically to climb into the cockpit. All of the foot levels have fixed cameras. They're not obnoxious because there's typically one camera angle per room, but it's annoying because the control stick changes directions every time you exit a room, forcing you to stop and get your bearings. It also sucks because cameras are sometimes positioned so that you can't see enemies until after they've started popping caps into your chest, which can be a death sentence since there's not much health. It feels like objects in rooms have super glue on them because if you touch pretty much anything, you stop moving unless you move at least 90 degrees away from the object in question. So rooms with bulky obstructions turn into mazes of invisible walls. But what really sinks the on-foot levels is the shooting. You don't aim your gun. The gun locks onto enemies and automatically shoots whatever you're locked onto, so the action isn't very fun or involving. There's no effective way to use cover, and you can strafe, but most of the levels are tight hallways where there's nowhere to strafe. You can crouch and roll to either side, but rolling takes a full second, leaves you open, and doesn't really do anything to help you actually dodge gunfire. It's so clunky that you just won't do it. Plus, enemies are so accurate that trying to maneuver around them is just going to get you shot a few extra times. It's almost impossible to avoid taking damage. The only effective way to beat these levels is to Leroy Jenkins them. Charge in mashing the fire button as quick as you can and hope the enemies die before you do, because there's no effective way to dodge enemy fire and you'll get screwed out of a medal for time if you even try. It's a rare game that not only expects, it encourages you to play like Rambo, when most games expect you to play like somebody that has a functioning brain. There also aren't any secondary weapons, which is another must-have for shooters. The only alternate weapon in the entire game is the Stormtrooper rifle, which is just a machine gun that runs out of ammo in 2 seconds. You can find health power-ups in the form of Bacta containers, but these buggers are so small and easy to miss and not indicated to you in any way. You only find one if you get lucky or play the levels until you memorize where they all are. These foot missions are so half-assed that they feel more like a weird mini-game than actual missions. What really sickens me though, is one of the game's bonus missions is an endurance level where you play as an on-foot character. Considering Rogue Leader's endurance mission takes a minimum of 3 melon farming hours to beat, forgive me if I don't feel like unlocking that level in order to critique it. Oh, except to unlock 4 of the 5 unlockable ships, you have to unlock that level and get at least a bronze on it. Shit. I don't really mind the on-foot levels, mostly because they're easy and short enough that they don't piss me off, and the vehicle levels are overall pretty fun and really well designed, actively removing most of the frustrations that plagued the previous games. Rebel Strike is not a bad game, it's just a betrayal of everything from the previous games. The other Rogue Squadron games are flight sims, and this game eschews flight levels for the most part for half-assed why did they even bother putting this in foot missions. The game is still fun, it's just not what you want in a Rogue Squadron game. And the other thing that really drags down this game for me, this game's story is an absolute mess. The first level of the game is holding off the Empire from invading Yavin after the Death Star's destruction. After that, the game splits into 2 campaigns, one for Luke and one for Wedge. I played Wedge's levels first because his levels are flying missions while Luke's lean more towards foot missions. You rescue some rebel prisoners from an Imperial prison, but one of the rescue transports gets hijacked, with the ship fleeing to Geonosis. It's very strongly hinted that the guy who hijacked the transport is Sarkly, a squad mate from the first level that defects to the Empire, but what confused me is that he defects in one of Luke's missions, which takes place long after Wedge runs into him. You track the guy to Geonosis, have a freaking awesome level where you fly a Jedi Starfighter, and then you forget about those prisoners that you are rescuing and go do something completely different. You investigate an Imperial research facility and find absolutely nothing. The capital ship that came with you gets pinned down by a super laser, so you break into the base and destroy the laser with an AT-ST, which is pretty much the most awesome thing ever. Not only have I wanted to pilot an AT-ST forever and ever, this thing regenerates health and has lock-on missiles that self-replenish. This thing is so overpowered that its levels are piss easy, but damn is it fun! You find out that the Empire has created a new division of pilots called the Storm Commandos, specifically to use special warships to surgically wipe out the rebellion. You're probably thinking they're the primary villains of the game, right? But no, you fight their strike cruisers and the brand new TIE Hunter starfighters in 2 levels, and then they're never mentioned again. What's funny is that you fight a group of TIE Hunters inside a giant spherical force field, and the elite and fearsome Storm Commandos will periodically crash into the force field and kill themselves. Incidentally, the TIE Hunters look awesome. I immediately built one out of Legos. It's just white because Batman took all of my black pieces. But as a mechanical engineer, this design confuses the hell out of me. It's the same size or smaller than the TIE Fighter, and yet this thing somehow has room for ion cannons, proton torpedo launchers, and a hyperdrive. No, it doesn't. It's also faster and uses more power than the TIE Fighter, and yet its wings look like they have less solar array surface area and would therefore provide less power. Besides, the Empire already has a starfighter with ion cannons, warheads, and faster than the TIE Fighter or Interceptor. It's called the TIE Defender, and it doesn't die in one hit like the TIE Hunter does. Rogue Squadron steals a squad of TIE Hunters in probably an awesome mission that you never see or hear about, and you attack an Imperial construction yard. Again, something completely different. This level confused the hell out of me. You break into this construction yard, then you see a super Star Destroyer under construction, and the other pilots start yelling at you to destroy cloaking devices, and I'm thinking, what in the actual hell is going on? Did Wedge finding Jack Squad at the research facility clue in the Alliance that the Empire was building stealth ships? And if not, how did they find out that the Empire was building this thing? The Wikipedia page says the rebels just attacked the shipyard because they were pissed about the super laser in the last level, so did they just decide to attack this shipyard and it just happened to have a super Star Destroyer in it? What would have been wrong with just telling me, hey, you're going to destroy a super Star Destroyer before the Empire finishes building it? That would have been simple, right? Besides, if the Alliance was trying to stop the Empire from building stealth ships, they're a little late on that one. One of the first video games I ever played was a game called Star Wars Rebel Assault 2 on the PC, and the story of that game revolved around the Empire building a new starfighter called the TIE Phantom, which can turn completely invisible, and you find out that the Empire already has a cloaked Super Star Destroyer to launch them from. And furthermore, how many Super Star Destroyers does the Empire have? There's the Executor from the movie, the Terror from Rebel Assault 2, and the we ran out of names so we'll just call it Bob from Rebel Strike. These things are 10 miles long apiece, for crying out loud. I mean, the justification given for the Empire not using TIE Defenders or TIE Advance during the Battle of Endor is that they're too expensive, but we've got plenty of cash to blow on 10-mile-long starships that are consistently defeated by 2 or 3 rebels apiece. What's strange is that this is the only level where you're allowed to use the TIE Hunter. It only becomes available in other missions if you get a gold medal in every mission in the game. This thing is fast and built out of tinfoil. It's a ship-to-ship dogfighter, and the A-Wings regenerating homing missiles make it the best dogfighter in the game. So the reward for 100% completion is a ship that you will never use. And get this, that's the end of Wedge's missions. It was like broken into 3 different stories that had nothing in common with one another. Luke's campaign isn't much more coherent. You rescue an Imperial defector who tells you that the Empire wants to kidnap some scientists who developed a planetary shield. You go to the planet, fight off an invasion, Sarkly betrays you but doesn't actually do anything except run away from you, and you rescue the scientists. Then that storyline comes to an abrupt halt, and you have a level reenacting the Battle of Hoth, or at least everything in the Battle of Hoth except for flying the speeders, which is the one part of the Battle of Hoth that's worth reenacting. Then you go to Dagobah to learn how to use the Force and your lightsaber, which has nothing to do with anything else that has happened in the game. Then you go to Tatooine, where you destroy Jabba's sail barge, which has nothing to do with anything else that's happened in the game. I get it. They sat down and they said, which famous scenes from the movie have we not reenacted yet? And they wanted to put these levels in the game. I get that. I don't have a problem with that. But these levels are completely disconnected from everything else that has happened in the game. The Sarlacc pit is the last level of Luke's story, so you go to Dagobah to learn how to use the Force and your lightsaber, so you can use them for exactly 1 level. These should be bonus missions, not part of the story. And the lightsaber level is awful. You can't deflect lasers back at enemies, so you have to kill them with the lightsaber. You can't block lasers unless you're holding B and directly facing the laser in question. You can't move while you're blocking, so it's easy to get pinned down. The only thing you can do with the Force is double jump, and just the cherry on top the shit sundae, you have to jump over the Sarlacc pit, which kills you instantly, over moving platforms that are slippery and easy to miss or slide off of with stiff as hell jumping controls. This level is only 1.5 minutes long, but it's 1.5 minutes of hell. I was seriously expecting bonus missions where you duel with Darth Vader because they have a special tutorial level for the lightsaber so that you can play 1 level that sucks. After you finish the other levels, you play the speeder bike level from Return of the Jedi, where I died more than I did through the entire rest of the game combined. And then you play a level where Chewbacca drives an AT-ST through the forest, mowing down stormtroopers. Again, this is a ridiculously fun level, but this is the last level of the game before you get to the bonus missions. I just think that the grand finale of the Rogue Squadron series shouldn't be driving a walker mowing down stormtroopers in what is basically a 5-minute continuous curb stomping. And I know this is the final level because they said fine. Screw it, the Battle of Endor is in multiplayer. Go there if you want a grand finale. Except I can't, because I don't have a droid to play with and rip its arms off when I lose. At the end of the level, you play as Han, setting the charges to blow up the Endor shield generator, but right as you set the charges, Sarkly shows up to kill you. Dude, the charges are already set. This thing is going to blow up regardless of what you do. You suck at being evil. Sarkly immediately realizes that he's an idiot and runs out of the bunker as it explodes, so the final boss fight of the game is you shooting Sarkly repeatedly in the ass as he desperately runs away from you. Ow! Stop that! I'll have to sit on a donut for a month, you a-hole! When your final boss fight makes the one in Daikatana look good, you have grievously screwed up. And the special missions, Death Star Escape, Cloud City Escape, Hoth Base Escape, all scenes from the movies and all on foot. Then there's Attacking the Executor, which I'm certain is a repeat of the shipyard level, and Endurance. So one of the bonus missions is decent, the other 4 suck. And the Death Star Escape level, any intelligent person would just run through the first part of the level so as to avoid detection for as long as possible to get to Princess Leia. But no, to get a medal, you're expected to charge through this level guns blazing so that the entire base knows you're there before you can rescue the princess. Did you guys even see the movie? Oh wait, yes you did, because half this level is watching video clips from A New Hope. I'm pretty sure the main reason this game's story is a mess is because all 15 of Rogue Leader's missions are available in the co-op mode, and Rogue Leader's missions form a solid story that spans all of the original Star Wars films, whereas Rebel Strike's story meanders before reenacting all the famous scenes that Rogue Leader missed. It's also probably why less than half of the game's levels are actual flying levels. The devs figure the game already has 15 flying levels in co-op, and that's plenty. That also goes for the unlockable ships. There are only a few levels where you can use unlockable ships because they're unlockables for the multiplayer mode. This is one of those games that seems to think having multiplayer content excuses having subpar single-player content. This is a lesson that developers who give a damn need to learn. Good multiplayer content is only as good as the people you play with, if you have people to play with. Good single-player lasts forever. And since they were clearly very proud of the multiplayer mode, let's take a dump all over it. The dogfight mode is pointless because you'll never hit the other player unless you use homing missiles, which kind of makes fighting another player pointless if you just point at them, fire a missile, and they die. If either player chooses the TIE Advance, they will pretty much automatically win because its homing cluster missiles will one-shot kill the enemy without even having to aim at them. The TIE Fighter and TIE Interceptor are completely useless because they can't carry warheads, and ships move so quickly that you're 5 kinds of screwed if you just try shooting at them with lasers. Plus, the TIE Interceptor only has 2 laser cannons in this game when everyone knows they have 4! And Factor 5 got this little factoid correct when the TIE Interceptor was a playable ship in the first Rogue Squadron. There's a mode where you have to capture bases and then protect them from enemies, but the multiplayer mode is limited to 2 players. There's only 1 person to protect your bases from, so this mode is pointless too. The only decent modes are the special modes where you race speeder bikes or drive ATSTs, or the Rampage mode where you can see who destroys the most items in the environment. Those modes are pretty fun. The co-op Rogue Leader missions have been made significantly harder than they were in the original game because the first thing Rogue Leader needed was to be even harder, and the high difficulty combined with the fact that players share lives means that a player who hasn't beaten Rogue Leader before will probably fail the mission for both of you. Plus, only 1 player is allowed to use a ship at a time, the only exceptions being the X-Wing and A-Wing, so you have to do rock, paper, scissors to see who gets to use any of the other ships. And the game's engine really can't handle co-op because the frame rate chugs all the time. So the multiplayer is a nice idea, but they shouldn't have built half the game around it. It's your own opinion whether a game that's about 60% good and 40% mediocre to lousy comes out as overall good or not, but for my money, I really like Rebel Strike. The flying levels may just be the best they've ever been outside of Battle for Naboo. The AT-ST levels are the stuff that dreams are made of. The speeder bike levels aren't great, but they're good for variety, and the foot levels, okay, they suck. Honestly, my biggest problem with the game is that it's just another modern game swept up in the multiplayer is God frenzy. The vast majority of the content is specifically for multiplayer, and that content is inaccessible unless you have a friend who likes Rogue Squadron as much as you do, and who comes over frequently to play it with you. And I can't put my finger on it. This game doesn't feel like a Rogue Squadron game. It feels like a party that was being thrown in Rogue Squadron's honor. It feels like the game's developers said, we've made 3 wildly successful games, do whatever the hell you want with the 4th one. Rebel Strike isn't a bad game, but it's a mixed bag. It's a bag that I really like, but mixed nonetheless.
What the fuck? Well, Vader's gonna have to choke a bitch.